The stench of desperation and greed hung heavy in the air of Xylo's station. Located at the fringes of civilized space, the decrepit space station had long ago abandoned any pretense of law or order. Now it served as a hub for smugglers, mercenaries, and those with nowhere else to go. In its shadowy corners, anything and anyone could be bought for the right price. Kale and Kale, Rostovo pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders as he made his way through the crowded marketplace. The former Galactic Alliance pilot kept his head down, keen eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor for the parts dealer he'd arranged to meet. The Wanderer, his small transport ship, needed a new quantum stabilizer, and Xylos was one of the few places where such parts could be found without too many questions. Still hiding in plain sight, Captain, a gravelly voice cut through the din of the marketplace. Kale turned to see Brixis, a four-armed Gorlin with skin like weathered leather. Not hiding, just careful. Brixis chuckled, a sound like rocks grinding together. The part you wanted will cost you. Galactic Alliance patrols have been tighter lately. I've got credits, Kale said, reaching into his pocket. Just need the stabilizer, and I'll be on my way. Actually, Brixis said, leaning closer, his breath rank with fermented buxa root. If you're looking for extra work, there's something interesting happening in the Shadow Auction House tonight. Big names, bigger merchandise. Kale shook his head. Not interested. Just the part. The Gorlin shrugged his four shoulders simultaneously. Suit yourself. But rumors say there'll be some rare items. Things that might interest a man with your background. After completing the transaction, Kale headed back toward his docking bay, the stabilizer secure in his pack. Despite his intentions to return directly to his ship, Brixis's words lingered in his mind. The Shadow Auction House wasn't just any black market. It was where the most valuable and often the most illegal items in the sector changed hands. Damn it, he muttered to himself, changing direction. Just a quick look wouldn't hurt. Maybe there would be additional parts worth salvaging for the Wanderer. The Shadow Auction House occupied an entire sublevel of the station. As Kale descended the spiral staircase, the air grew thicker, heavy with exotic perfumes meant to mask the underlying smell of unwashed bodies and fear. The dimly lit amphitheater was already filled with potential buyers, crime lords, corrupt officials, and the occasional pirate captain, all seated in concentric rings around a central platform. Kale found a spot in the back row, keeping his head down. The auction had already begun, with various items being paraded across the stage. Rare artifacts, illegal tech, banned substances. He was about to leave when the auctioneer, a thin Vrexian with unnaturally extended limbs, announced the final lot. And now, esteemed guests, our special finale for the evening. The crowd murmured as two burly guards dragged a figure onto the stage. It was a young woman, but clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle, luminescent pattern that shifted and glowed beneath the harsh lights. Long silver hair cascaded down her back, partially obscuring her face, but Kale could see her amber eyes blazing with defiance despite the heavy restraints binding her wrists. A rare specimen indeed, the auctioneer continued, his voice oily with false charm. One of the last Zorians from the fallen world of Zor Prime. As you know, since the KRYLL Empire's conquest, such specimens have become exceedingly difficult to acquire. Kale tensed. The Zorian people were nearly extinct following the KRYLL invasion of their homeworld. Most have been enslaved or killed, their civilization ransacked for its advanced technology and unique resources. The Alliance had done nothing to help them, a fact that had contributed to Kale's eventual departure from military service. Note the distinctive markings. The auctioneer continued, gesturing for one of the guards to pull the Zorian's hair back, exposing more of her face and the glowing patterns that extended down her neck. Indicative of pure bloodline. And still young, barely 20 standard cycles. Imagine the possibilities, gentlemen. The crowd began to stir with interest, and several paddles rose to initiate bidding. Kale felt sick watching the proceedings, but remained rooted to his spot. Ah, I see Lord Forlag has joined us tonight, the auctioneer said, pointing to a hulking figure in the front row. A distinguished representative of the KRYLL Empire honors us with his presence. The KRYLL Lord rose slightly from his seat, his reptilian features partially hidden beneath an ornate helmet. The Empire has special interest in these creatures, he said, his voice a low rumble. I will start the bidding at 50,000 credits. The price escalated quickly, with Lord Forlag easily outbidding most competitors. The Zorian girl stood silently throughout, her eyes scanning the crowd, not with fear, but with contempt. As the bidding narrowed to just Forlag and a syndicate boss from the Outer Rim, the KRYLL Lord grew impatient. He stood and approached the stage, extending a gauntlet hand toward the Zorian. Let me inspect the merchandise more closely before I commit further funds, he demanded. The auctioneer bowed obsequiously. Of course, my lord. When Forlag's cold, scaled fingers reached for the girl's face, something unexpected happened. The Zorian's patterns flared with sudden intensity, and she lunged forward, despite her restraints, sinking her teeth into the KRYLL Lord's hand. Forlag bellowed in pain and rage, yanking his bleeding hand back. The guards immediately moved to subdue the girl, shock batons raised. I apologize for this unfortunate incident, the auctioneer stammered, signaling the guards to hold. As you can see, this one is spirited. Perhaps she requires additional conditioning before. No, Forlag growled, green blood dripping from his wounded hand. I prefer them spirited. It makes the breaking more satisfying. 100,000 credits. The syndicate boss shook his head and lowered his paddle. The auctioneer looked around the room. 100,000 credits from Lord Forlag. Going once. The Zorian's eyes, filled with hatred and desperation, swept across the crowd one last time. For a brief moment, they locked with Kale's. There was something in that gaze, not just defiance, but intelligence, purpose, a silent plea that spoke to something long dormant within him. Going twice. Memories flashed through Kale's mind. The fall of Zor Prime, the Alliance's failure to intervene, his own resignation in disgust. The last mission where he'd been ordered to stand down while a civilian transport was boarded by KRYLL forces. The nightmares that still haunted him. Sold to 150,000 credits, Kale heard himself say, rising to his feet. A shocked silence fell over the auction house. All eyes turned to him, including the blazing amber gaze of the Zorian girl. I beg your pardon? The auctioneer said, clearly flustered. You heard me. 150,000 credits. Kale's mind was screaming at him to sit down, to shut up, but something else, something he'd thought long dead, drove him forward. Lord Forlag turned slowly, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied the human who dared to challenge him. 200,000, he hissed. 250,000, Kale countered immediately. The crowd began to murmur excitedly. The Zorian girl stood straighter now, her glowing patterns pulsing with a new rhythm. This is most irregular, the auctioneer said. Lord Forlag is a valued client of the Shadow Auction House. And 300,000, Forlag interrupted, his voice thick with menace. Kale swallowed hard. He didn't have 300,000 credits. He barely had a tenth of that. But he couldn't stop now. All the credits in my account, plus my ship, the Wanderer. Full title transfer. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Trading a starship, even a small transport, for a single slave was unheard of. The auctioneer blinked rapidly. That would need to be appraised, but the Wanderer is a modified Stellar-class light freighter with custom shield generators and a Rylex FTL drive, Kale said. Worth at least 500,000 on any market. Lord Forlag's scaled face contorted with fury. This is absurd. I am an emissary of the KRYLL Empire. You cannot. The auctioneer raised his hands placatingly. My lord, the rules of the shadow auction are absolute. Highest bid wins, regardless of status or affiliation. He turned to Kale. If your ship's value can be verified, then it appears you have the winning bid, sir. Forlag's hand moved to the weapon at his hip. I will not be outbid by some human scum. Security droids immediately surrounded the KRYLL Lord, their weapons raised. The auction house might operate outside galactic law, but it had its own rules, strictly enforced to ensure the wealthy clientele felt secure enough to spend their credits freely. "Lord Forlag, please," the auctioneer said, his voice strained. "Violence is prohibited within the auction house. You are, of course, welcome to negotiate with the buyer afterward, should he be willing." Kale kept his eyes fixed on the Zorian girl, whose expression had shifted from defiance to cautious curiosity. What the hell had he just done? He had no plan, no idea what would happen next. He just traded everything he owned for slave he had no right to own. "Your ship will be inspected immediately," the auctioneer informed him. "If it matches your claim value, the sale will be completed. Please remain here." As authentication droids were dispatched to verify the Wanderer's worth, Kale found himself under the scrutiny of the entire auction house. None more intense than the burning amber gaze of the Zorian girl and the hateful stare of Lord Forlag. The inspection took less than 30 minutes. The Wanderer, despite its worn exterior, had modifications and upgrades that made it valuable indeed. The authentication was confirmed, and Kale was instructed to approach the stage to claim his property. As he walked forward, whispers followed him. Was he a rival slave trader? A Galactic Alliance spy? A privateer working for some unknown faction? No one could fathom why a seemingly ordinary human would pay such an extraordinary price. Up close, the Zorian girl was even more striking. The luminescent patterns on her skin formed intricate designs that seemed to shift and flow with her breathing. Her silver hair shimmered under the lights, and those amber eyes studied him with intelligence and wariness. "Ownership transfer complete," the auctioneer declared, handing Kale a control fob for the girl's restraints. "Congratulations on your acquisition." Kale pocketed the fob without looking at it. "Let's go," he said quietly to the girl. She didn't move, her eyes narrowing. "Why?" she asked, her voice low and melodious despite the edge of hostility. Before Kale could respond, a heavy hand fell on his shoulder. He turned to find himself face to face with Lord Forlag. "This is not over, human," the KRYLL Lord hissed. "That specimen belongs to the Empire by right of conquest. I don't know what game you're playing, but you've made a grave mistake." Kale stared back steadily. "The auction's over. She's coming with me. For now," Forlag said, his lipless mouth twisting into what might have been a smile. "Enjoy your prize while you can." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "No one outbids the KRYLL Empire without consequences." As the KRYLL Lord stalked away, Kale turned back to the Zorian girl. "We need to leave. Now." For a moment, he thought she might refuse, might challenge him right there. Instead, she gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Whether she was choosing to trust him or simply selecting what she perceived as the lesser of two evils, he couldn't tell. As they left the auction house, Kale could feel eyes following them. Not just Forlag's, but others, curious about the mysterious human who had just spent a fortune on the last lot of the night. The Zorian girl walked beside him, her restraint still in place, but her head held high, her glowing patterns pulsing with what seemed like barely contained energy. "I'm Kale," he said quietly as they navigated the crowded corridors back toward the docking bays. "Kalen Rostova, captain of, well, former captain of the Wanderer." She didn't respond immediately, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you buy me?" It was a fair question, one Kale wasn't sure he could answer. "It seemed like the right thing to do at the time," he said lamely. She made a sound that might have been a scoff. "And now? What will you do with your purchase, Captain?" "I don't know," Kale admitted. "But I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to keep you as a slave." They had reached the docking bay where the Wanderer was berthed. Kale hesitated, realizing that the ship was no longer legally his. "There's a complication," he said. "I need to get my crew off the ship before the new owners take possession." The Zorian girl's eyes narrowed. "You traded your ship, your home, without consulting your crew?" "It was an impulse decision," Kale said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not my finest moment in terms of planning." For the first time, a hint of something other than defiance or suspicion crossed her face, surprise, tinged with confusion. "You sacrificed your ship on impulse?" For a slave? For a person, Kale corrected. And yes, apparently I did. He pulled out the control fob for her restraints. May I? She hesitated, then extended her bound wrists. Kale pressed the release, and the restraints fell away. Thank you, she said, rubbing her wrists. My name is Lyra. Well, Lyra, Kale said, I hope my crew doesn't kill me for this. The Wanderer's boarding ramp was down, and Kale led the way up. As they entered the ship's main cargo hold, a metallic voice called out from the engine room. Captain, where have you been? Did you get the stabilizer? I've recalibrated the plasma conduits, but we still need that part to safely navigate the Cygnus Nebula. A humanoid figure emerged from the corridor, an android with a weathered chassis and glowing blue optical sensors. He stopped abruptly at the sight of Lyra. Jax, we have a situation, Kale began. Before he could continue, another voice cut in. Who's she? A tall woman with close-cropped dark hair and a perpetual scowl appeared from the cockpit, a hand resting casually on the blaster at her hip. Sarah, Jax, this is Lyra, Kale said. She's, coming Wi-Fi US. But there's a complication. There usually is when you go out alone, Sarah said dryly. Her eyes swept over Lyra, noting the distinctive markings. A Azorian? I thought they were all gone. Not all, Lyra said. Evenly, though the KRYLL tried their best. Jax's mechanical head tilted. Captain, your stress indicators are elevated, and you're exhibiting signs of what humans call guilt. What have you done? Kale took a deep breath. I may have traded the Wanderer to buy Lyra at an auction. There was a moment of stunned silence before both crew members erupted simultaneously. You did what? Sarah's hand moved from her hip to her blaster. Captain, that is highly illogical. The probability of survival without our ship is... I know. Kale raised his hands placatingly. It wasn't planned, but we need to get our essential gear and get off before the new owners arrive to claim a ship. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You traded our home, our livelihood, for a slave? Have you lost your mind? I'm not a slave, Lyra interjected, her voice sharp. I never was, despite what the KRYLL and their collaborators believe. I am a free person who was illegally captured and trafficked. And now you're free, Kale said. Once we get off this station. With what ship? Jax demanded, his mechanical arms gesticulating wildly. The probability of acquiring new transportation with our limited funds is... I might be able to help with that, Lyra interrupted, her luminescent patterns pulsing more intensely. If you truly intend to release me, Captain Rostova, I have certain connections that could be of use to all of us. Sarah's expression remained skeptical. What kind of connections could a slave possibly have? Lyra's amber eyes flashed. The kind that survived the fall of an entire civilization. The kind that had been working against the KRYLL Empire from the shadows. Before the conversation could continue, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Jax rushed to a console. Multiple signatures approaching the docking bay. Based on their formation and energy signatures, they appear to be KRYLL enforcers. Kale cursed under his breath. Forlag didn't waste any time. You crossed the KRYLL Lord? Sarah asked incredulously. For her. She glared at Lyra. We can debate the wisdom of my decisions later, Kale said, moving toward the weapons locker. Right now, we need to get out of here. Jax, how long until they reach us? Approximately 3 minutes, Captain. I need weapons, Lyra said suddenly. When the others looked at her in surprise, she added, I know how to fight, and I won't be taken again by anyone. Kale hesitated only briefly before tossing her a compact blaster. Set to stun for now. Captain, Jax protested. The probability that she will. If I wanted to harm you, I would have already done so. Lyra cut in, checking the weapon with practiced ease. Your captain released my restraints the moment we left the auction house. Sarah rolled her eyes. Fantastic. A reckless captain and an armed alien we know nothing about. This day just keeps getting better. We need to move, Kale insisted. Grab only what you can carry. Essential gear, personal items. We've got 2 minutes. As they hastily gathered their belongings, The ship's external cameras showed a contingent of KRYLL soldiers entering the docking bay, led by Lord Forlag himself. "They're going to cut off our exit," Sarah noted, slinging a pack over her shoulder. Lyra stepped forward. "There's another way out of this bay, a maintenance corridor that connects to the lower levels. From there, we can reach the refugee sector." Kale raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" "I memorized the station layout during transport. It's a Zorian trait, eidetic memory for spatial relationships." Lyra's patterns pulsed. "You'll have to trust me, Captain." Kale looked at his crew. Jax, calculating probabilities, Sarah ready for a fight, but clearly unhappy about the situation. Then he looked at Lyra, who had every reason to abandon them to their fate, but was instead offering a way out. "Lead the way," he decided. They slipped out through the Wanderer's emergency hatch, dropping into the maintenance space beneath the docking platform just as the KRYLL soldiers began to surround the ship. Lyra moved with surprising confidence, guiding them through a maze of service tunnels and access shafts. "The refugee sector is the most chaotic part of the station," she explained as they crawled through a narrow conduit. "It's also where the KRYLL have the least influence. Too many species they consider beneath their notice." "And after we get there?" Sarah asked, still suspicious. "There's a resistance cell," Lyra replied. "People who help those trying to escape the Empire's reach." They emerged in a crowded, dimly lit sector of the station that seemed worlds away from the relative order of the commercial and docking areas. Makeshift dwellings had been constructed in what was once a cargo storage facility. Beings of dozens of species moved through the narrow pathways between shelters, many bearing the obvious signs of displacement and hardship. "Stay close," Lyra advised. "This place can be dangerous for outsiders." As they made their way deeper into the refugee sector, Kale noticed how Lyra's demeanor had changed. Her movements were more confident, her posture less defensive. This was familiar territory for her. They had just reached a junction of several pathways when shouts erupted behind them. A squad of KRYLL soldiers was pushing through the crowd, scanning faces. "They're tracking us somehow," Sarah hissed, pulling her blaster. Lyra's eyes widened in realization. The auction control fob. It must have a tracker. Kale quickly pulled out the device he'd used to release her restraints and smashed it under his boot. Too late. They've already got our direction. The refugees were scattering as the KRYLL advanced, their reptilian forms imposing in their armored suits. Kale and his companions backed down a side passage, weapons ready. "Jax, any other exits?" Kale asked urgently. The android's eyes flickered as he accessed his stored data. "None in immediate proximity, Captain." "Then we stand and fight," Sarah said grimly. As the KRYLL soldiers closed in, cornering them in the narrow passage, Lyra stepped forward. "Wait." The patterns on her skin began to pulse more intensely, the luminescence growing brighter until it cast eerie shadows on the walls around them. She raised her hands, and to everyone's shock, the patterns seemed to detach from her skin, flowing like liquid light into the air before her. The KRYLL soldiers hesitated, their weapons wavering. "What is she doing?" Sarah whispered. "I don't know," Kale replied, transfixed. The floating patterns suddenly coalesced into a blinding flash that engulfed the corridor. When Kale could see again, the KRYLL soldiers were sprawled on the ground, unconscious or disoriented. Lyra swayed, the light of her patterns dimming significantly. Kale caught her before she could fall. "What was that?" he asked, awed. "Photonic manipulation," she said weakly. "A Zorian ability. Not all of us can do it. Takes a lot of energy. Is that why the KRYLL want you so badly?" Sarah asked, her suspicion tempered with new respect. Lyra shook her head. "Not just that. I carry something they want, something they need." She looked up at Kale. "Something that could help bring down the Empire." More shouts echoed from nearby corridors. "Reinforcements coming." "We need to go," Jax urged. "That display of bioluminescent energy will have been detected by any KRYLL scanners in the vicinity." "This way," Lyra said, pointing down a narrow passage barely visible behind a stack of crates. "The Resistance safe house is close." They hurried through the passage, emerging in what appeared to be an abandoned processing facility. Ancient machinery lined the walls, dormant for decades. Lyra approached a seemingly blank wall and placed her palm against it. The patterns on her skin pulsed weakly, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden door. "Quickly," she urged. They slipped inside, and the door sealed behind them. They found themselves in a surprisingly well-equipped command center. Several beings of different species looked up in surprise at their entrance, hands moving to weapons. Lyra, a tall, slender being with similar luminescent patterns, stepped forward. "We thought you were lost when the transport was captured." Talon, Lyra greeted him with obvious relief. "It was close. I would still be in KRYLL hands if not for Captain Rostova." She gestured to Kale. Talon's glowing eyes assessed Kale and his crew with cautious interest. "You freed her from the KRYLL? He bought me at auction," Lyra clarified. "Traded his ship to outbid a KRYLL lord." The Resistance members murmured among themselves, clearly surprised. Why would a human make such a sacrifice? Talon asked directly. Kale shrugged uncomfortably. It seemed like the right thing to do. Talon studied him for a long moment. Few in this galaxy would act on such principles, especially at such cost. He turned to the others. "Prepare for evacuation. If the KRYLL track them here, this location is compromised." As the Resistance members hurriedly gathered equipment and data storage devices, Talon led Kale, Lyra, Sarah, and Jax to a side room with a holographic display showing the station layout. "We have a ship docked in a maintenance sector," he explained. "It's designed to look like a waste management vessel, but it has modified engines and weapon systems. We could get you off Xylos, but after that..." He looked at Kale questioningly. "After that, I have no idea," Kale admitted. "I didn't exactly plan this far ahead." "He sacrificed his ship on impulse," Jax added helpfully. "The captain often prioritizes ethical considerations over logical planning." Sarah snorted. "That's one way of putting it." Lyra, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "He should come with us to the Vale Nebula outpost. The Council will want to meet the human who defied the KRYLL to save. One of our own." "The Council?" Kale asked. "The remaining Zorian leadership," Talon explained. "Those who escaped the fall of Zor Prime. They coordinate the resistance effort against the KRYLL Empire." Kale exchanged glances with his crew. Sarah looked skeptical but resigned, while Jax's mechanical features were unreadable. "We don't have many options at this point," Kale noted. "And if your council has ships, maybe we can arrange to acquire one. Or passage to a neutral system," Sarah added. "The council will be generous to those who helped Lyra," Talon assured them. "Her safe return is more important than you can imagine." Lyra's patterns pulsed softly. "I carry the cipher," she said simply. Talon's eyes widened. "You managed to—" "Yes," she interrupted. "It's secure." "The cipher?" Kale asked. "Not here," Talon said quickly. "We need to move. The evacuation ship leaves in 20 minutes." As they prepared to depart, alarms suddenly blared throughout the hidden facility. One of the Resistance members rushed in. "KRYLL forces have entered the outer perimeter. They're using some kind of advanced scanning technology. They've detected our shielding." "How long do we have?" Talon demanded. "Minutes at most. We'll never reach the evacuation ship in time," Talon said grimly. "We need a diversion." Kale stepped forward. "Let me and my crew handle that. You get Lyra to your ship." "Captain," Jax protested, "the probability of success in a direct confrontation with KRYLL forces is—" "Better than you think," Kale interrupted. "Sarah, remember that trick we pulled in the Capella system?" A slow smile spread across the woman's face. "The one with the atmospheric recirculators? That could work." Talon looked between them. "What do you need?" "Access to the environmental controls for this section," Kale said. "And something that will burn with a lot of smoke, but minimal toxicity." As the Resistance members hastily gathered supplies, Lyra approached Kale. "You don't have to do this," she said. "You've already risked everything for me, a stranger." "Not entirely by choice," Kale reminded her. "But now that I'm in, I might as well see it through." He paused. Besides, I'm curious about this cipher that has the KRYLL so worked up. If we survive, I'll tell you everything, Lyra promised. Her hand moved to her chest, where a faint glow was visible beneath her clothing. The cipher is more than information. It's hope. A chance to strike back at the Empire. Kale nodded. Then let's make sure you get away safely. The plan came together quickly. Using the station's environmental systems, they would create a cascading series of pressure failures and smoke screens, directing the KRYLL forces away from the Resistance's escape route, while creating the impression of a much larger force opposing them. We'll meet you at these coordinates after we've drawn them off, Kale told Talon, pointing to a location on the station map. If we're not there in 30 minutes, leave without us. The Council would consider it a debt of honor to ensure your safety, Talon said solemnly. We will wait as long as possible. As the Resistance members prepared to move out with Lyra, she turned back to Kale one last time. Her luminescent patterns pulsed in a complex sequence, almost like a language of light. What does that mean? Kale asked. It's an old Zorian blessing, she said. May the stars light your path when darkness surrounds you. Before Kale could respond, she was gone, disappearing with Talon and the others through a concealed exit. Well, Captain, Sarah said, checking her blaster, ready to cause some trouble. It's what we do best, Kale replied with a grim smile. Jack sighed, a remarkably human sound from his mechanical frame. I calculate a 37% probability of survival. But I must admit, those are better odds than many of our previous endeavors. That's the spirit. Kale clapped the android on the shoulder. Let's go. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Working with precise coordination, Kale, Sarah, and Jax triggered emergency systems throughout the sector, creating a series of explosions, pressure vents, and smoke clouds that sent the KRYLL forces scrambling in confusion. Jax accessed the station's communication systems, broadcasting false reports of resistance fighters in multiple locations. As they made their way through the smoke-filled corridors toward the rendezvous point, they encountered a squad of KRYLL soldiers led by none other than Lord Forlag himself. The human, the KRYLL Lord snarled, recognizing Kale. Where is the Zorian? Long gone, Kale said, raising his blaster. You might as well give up the chase. Forlag laughed, a harsh, grating sound. The KRYLL Empire does not give up, human. Especially not when the prize is as valuable as the cipher. So, you know about that, Kale remarked, trying to buy time as Sarah maneuvered into a flanking position. Of course. Why do you think I was so interested in that particular slave? Forlag's reptilian eyes narrowed. The question is, how much do you know? Enough to keep it out of your hands, Kale replied. Forlag raised his weapon. Then you are of no further use. Before he could fire, Sarah shot from the side, hitting one of the KRYLL soldiers. In the ensuing confusion, Jax activated the emergency fire suppression system, filling the corridor with dense foam that provided cover for their escape. They ran through the chaos, pursued by Forlag and his remaining soldiers. A shot grazed Kale's arm, and another struck Jax in the shoulder, damaging his mobility servos. Leave me, the android insisted as Kale and Sarah dragged him toward the rendezvous point. My systems are damaged, but reparable. You have a 22% better chance of escape without me slowing you down. Not happening, Kale grunted. We don't leave crew behind. They reached the coordinates Talon had provided, a small docking port on the station's underside, typically used for maintenance vessels. To their relief, a ship was waiting, its ramp extended. Lyra appeared at the top of the ramp. Hurry, she called, her patterns pulsing with urgency. They had almost reached the ship when a blast struck the deck behind them, sending them sprawling. Lord Forlag emerged from the smoke, flanked by two elite KRYLL guards. This ends now, the KRYLL Lord growled, advancing on them. Sarah, her leg injured from the blast, raised her blaster defiantly. Jax, systems faltering, attempted to shield Kale with his damaged body. Kale struggled to his feet, placing himself between Forlag and the ship, between Forlag and Lyra. You've lost, human, Forlag said, weapon aimed at Kale's heart. The Zorian and the Sci-Fi will return to the Empire where they belong. I don't think so, Kale replied, his own blaster steady despite his wounds. Suddenly, the air behind Forelag rippled with energy. Lyra had descended the ramp, her body glowing with increasing intensity. The patterns on her skin separated once more, forming a swirling vortex of light around her. "Stand down, KRYLL," she commanded, her voice resonant with power. "Or witness what the Zorians are truly capable of." Forelag hesitated, then sneered. "Your tricks won't save you this time." He swung his weapon toward her. Lyra's light exploded outward in a concentrated beam that struck Forelag squarely in the chest, sending him flying backward. His guards, momentarily stunned, recovered quickly and opened fire, but the energy seemed to dissolve in the aura surrounding Lyra. With a gesture, she sent another pulse of light that engulfed the guards, leaving them unconscious on the deck. Forelag, wounded but still conscious, struggled to rise. "This isn't over," he gasped. "The Empire will never stop hunting you. The Cipher must return to its rightful owners." "The Cipher never belonged to the KRYL," Lyra said coldly. "It is Zorian, created by our scientists to protect our people, not to be weaponized by conquerors." She turned to Kale and the others. "Kulme, we must leave before more arrive." With her help, they made it up the ramp and into the ship. Talon was at the controls, already initiating launch sequences. "The KRYL are scrambling fighters," he reported. "We have minutes at most." Lyra helped settle Sarah and Jax in the ship's small medical bay, then returned to where Kale stood watching the launch preparations. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." "The photonic manipulation is rare, even among Zorians," she explained, her patterns now dimmed to a faint glow, her energy clearly depleted. "It's one of the reasons the KRYL want me specifically. They believe they can harness it as a weapon." "And the Cipher?" Lyra touched her chest, where the glow was more distinct now. "The Cipher is our greatest achievement and our greatest burden. It contains the complete genetic and cultural memory of our people. Everything the KRYL tried to erase when they destroyed our world. But it also contains the key to activating the ancient defense network." "I'm not familiar with that," Kale admitted. "Few are. It's a system of automated defense platforms created by a long-vanished civilization. The Zorians discovered how to activate it, but before we could implement it, the KRYL invaded." Her amber eyes held his. "With the network operational, we could create a shield that would repel KRYL forces from dozens of worlds they've conquered." The ship shuddered as it detached from the station. Talon's voice came over the comm system. "KRYL fighters incoming. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Kale steadied himself against a bulkhead. "So that's why Forelag was so determined." Lyra nodded. "If the Empire knew you had helped me escape with the Cipher, they would hunt you to the edges of the galaxy." "Well," Kale said with a wry smile, "it's not like I had much of a life plan anyway." The ship lurched as it accelerated away from Xylo's station, followed closely by KRYL pursuit vessels. What happened next was a blur of evasive maneuvers, exchanged fire, and a daring jump to hyperspace through a gap in the KRYL formation. As the streaking stars of hyperspace replaced the chaos of battle on the viewports, Kale found himself in the medical bay with Sarah and Jax. His pilot had suffered a leg wound that would heal cleanly, and the android was already receiving repairs from one of the Zorian resistance members who had experience with synthetic systems. "So," Sarah said as a medic treated her injury, "we've lost our ship, made enemies of the KRYL Empire, and thrown our lot in with a rebellion that's outmanned and outgunned. Just another day with Captain Rostova." To be fair, Jax interjected, his systems stabilizing. "This situation is 27% more precarious than our typical misadventures." Kale smiled despite the pain of his own wounds. "Look at it this way. At least we're not bored." Sarah rolled her eyes, but couldn't quite suppress her own smile. "Never a dull moment with you, Captain." Later, as the ship continued its journey toward the hidden resistance base in the Veil Nebula, Kale found Lyra in the observation dome, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. Her luminescent patterns had recovered some of their brilliance, casting a soft glow over her contemplative features. "How are your friends?" she asked as he joined her. "Healing. Sarah's tough, and Jax's systems are resilient." Kale leaned against the railing beside her. "They're not happy about losing the Wanderer, but they understand why I did it." "Do you?" Lyra turned to face him. "Understand why you did it, I mean. You sacrificed everything for a stranger." Kale considered the question. "I spent years in the Galactic Alliance, following orders, looking the other way when convenient. When Zor Prime fell, we were told not to intervene, that it wasn't our fight." He shook his head. "I resigned my commission after that, but resignation isn't the same as action. Maybe I was just tired of standing by." "A costly moment of conscience," Lyra observed. "Worth it," Kale replied, surprising himself with his certainty. Besides, the Wanderer was just a ship. Well-loved, but still just metal and circuits. What the Sci-Fi represents, what you're fighting for, that's something real. Lyra's patterns pulsed with emotion. "The Council will want to meet you when we arrive. They'll be grateful for what you've done. They might even offer you a ship." "I'm not doing this for a reward," Kale said. "I know." Lyra's amber eyes studied him. "That's why they'll trust you." She hesitated, then added, "Why trust you?" The ship hummed around them as they stood in companionable silence, watching the hypnotic patterns of hyperspace. So much had changed in a single day. Kale had lost his ship but gained a purpose. Lyra had escaped captivity and moved one step closer to her mission. And somewhere behind them, the KRYLL Empire was mobilizing, determined to recapture what they saw as theirs. "What happens next?" Kale asked eventually. "We reach the outpost. We plan. We fight." Lyra's voice was steady, her resolve clear. "The Cypher gives us a chance, perhaps our only chance, to push back against the Empire. It won't be easy or safe." "Few worthwhile things are," Kale replied. "You and your crew could still walk away once we reach the outpost," Lyra pointed out. "Find passage to a neutral system. Start over." Kale considered this, then shook his head. "I think we're in this now. All of us." He smiled. "Besides, Sarah would never forgive me if we missed out on the chance to give the KRYLL Empire a bloody nose." Lyra's patterns rippled with what might have been laughter. "I think I'm going to like your crew, Captain Rostova." "They grow on you," Kale agreed, "like a stubborn fungus." As if on cue, Jax's voice came over the ship's comm system. "Captain, Talon has requested your presence on the bridge. We're approaching the nebula's outer boundary." Kale straightened. "Duty calls." "It always does," Lyra said, moving toward the door with him. She paused, her hand briefly touching his. "Thank you, Kale. Not just for saving me, but for reminding me that even in these dark times, there are still people willing to stand up for what's right." "Even impulsively?" Kale asked with a half-smile. "Especially impulsively," Lyra replied, her own smile illuminated by the gentle glow of her patterns. "Sometimes the heart sees more clearly than the mind." Together they made their way to the bridge, where Talon and the others were preparing for the delicate navigation through the nebula's shifting currents. Beyond lay the hidden resistance base, the Zorian Council, and the next chapter in their unexpected journey together. As they emerged from hyperspace into the swirling, iridescent gases of the Veil Nebula, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose, of rightness. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the KRYLL Empire would throw at them, he was exactly where he needed to be. The auction had ended with him buying an untamable alien girl, but what he'd really purchased was his own redemption, and perhaps, if they were very lucky, a chance to change the fate of the galaxy itself.